Welcome back to a Slice of Empathy podcast. Today we're joined by Dani Runeback, a woman who has transformed her deepest struggles into a journey of empowerment. From facing abuse, trauma, addiction, as well as OCD and grief, her resilience shines right on through. She once found herself trapped in people-pleasing and self-doubt, but chose to redefine her life. And as the founder of the Money Mumma, Dani now offers a safe, non-judgmental space for women to overcome hardship as well as reclaim their power. And in today's episode, she'll be sharing her story of recovery, self-discovery, and how she empowers others to do the same. So with that, let's dive into Dani Runeback's inspiring journey from surviving to thriving. I appreciate you taking the time to join me. I'm really excited to learn more about you. So if we could maybe start off with telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so when I was 4, I was sexually assaulted by my father and then assaulted physically and emotionally from my stepfather. And then I've had just a lot of traumas in my life. So I've been through a bad miscarriage where I nearly died to the end of when it all went really, really bad. They had 2 blood warmers with blood transfusions in each arm, trying to pump the blood into me as quick as they could. And that wasn't working. So then I've been through the loss of my mum and my grandma in 3 months. I've been through addictions, anorexia, lots of different mental health conditions. So I had OCD, anxiety, just lots of different conditions at different stages. And so from there, I've reached out and went and did some courses. So I've done a meditation teacher, holistic counselling. I've done Reiki master, kids coaching, currently doing a master practitioner in life coaching. I've done NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, positive psychology, lots of different courses to give me different tools in my toolbox to help me both heal within myself and also help others heal. So that's just a quick rundown of my life's journey.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I'm curious about your business, the Money Mumma. Can you tell us a little bit how you came to kind of maybe launch that business?
Yeah, sure. So during my journeys of healing, and I wanted to start a business where I could help other mums through their life journeys, whatever that may be, to help them heal, transform and empower. Just bringing out different tools from my toolbox to help them along their journey.
Awesome. I'm really inspired by that. And actually, I want to touch a little bit on people pleasing, OCD and addictions for sure. But before we kind of move into like talking a bit about like people pleasing that so many of like us, especially those of us who have suffered from trauma experience, can you tell us a little bit about how OCD and maybe later addiction had manifested for you? I personally have had my own experiences with OCD beginning pretty early on in childhood, but would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, my addictions became bad after I lost my baby, which was 14 and a half weeks, and that big trauma from there. I was 16 at the time and I didn't have anyone to speak to, and I didn't know anyone to speak to. So I just ended up, that was my life, like just numbing myself because I blamed myself. And what had happened to start with was I'd fallen down some stairs, and that made the placenta come apart from the wall. So that's what started all the big blood clots. So I numbed myself by just going to drugs. And it wasn't until I was 25 and I found my husband, my now husband, that I didn't need that anymore. So he helped me a lot to come out of a lot of things that I was doing back then. So that's been 15 years. Yeah. And then with my OCD, I think that was part of my addiction as well. So when I was heavily on the drugs, I can remember not even wanting to touch a door handle, and I'd have to get a tissue and touch the door handle and things like as when I went out, I'd have to have a shower when I got home and wash my hair because I just didn't feel clean unless I'd washed my hair and had a shower. So I had to push myself out of that and go out of my comfort zone and try doing those things without turning the door handle, without a tissue, and seeing that everything will be okay, and same as going out. So, I stopped washing my hair and having a shower and everything was okay. Like, I didn't get sick, or it was just things that it was all in my head. So it's about just pushing past those barriers and reprogramming your brain to think otherwise.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to share that with us. I'm incredibly sorry for your loss. Can't even imagine how difficult that must have been. But I'm so glad it sounds like that your husband has really kind of helped you through these series of events, help you kind of navigate through them. I personally can identify with that as well. My husband and I have been together 18 years, married 16. So we're pretty young. He and I actually met during the time where I was still kind of experiencing abuse and whatnot at the home. And we're both, again, very young. And honestly, I think if it wasn't for him, I don't know how I would have gotten out of that situation or gotten through it. But I attest a lot of my healing to him, being patient enough to kind of help me through that. And so I love to hear that, because I know a lot of times, especially for those of us who have come from abuse and trauma, that a lot of times partners might find it very difficult to navigate that. So it's really inspiring to hear that there are so many partners out there that have the patience, love, and all that to kind of help you navigate, because marriage can be very difficult. And I also want to talk a little bit about people pleasing, because again, that's something that I've experienced, that I've been trying to navigate for so many years. And although I've gotten better at it, it's something that I still find myself kind of falling back on and trying to continuously navigate. But your story will kind of touches on the idea of people pleasing, something that many of our listeners can also relate to. Can you tell us about how you might have identified that behavior in yourself and maybe the impact that it has had on your life?
Yeah. So after doing a lot of the different courses and stuff that I've done, I've come to realize that the people pleasing came from childhood traumas. So basically trying to reach out a lot, to my mum, and not thinking that I was good enough and never being heard from mum and always being pushed to the side. So it was like she had better things to do and didn't want to hear about me. So I think that it all came from that. When it was at my worst was when I was working. I got a job in childcare and I was so grateful for that. And I just used to kind of try and buy people, just spending a lot of money and buying gifts and stuff like that. And I remember one Christmas, we had upstairs was a staff room. I got so much stuff, I collected stuff for about 2 months. I bought stuff, Christmas, everything related to Christmas. And I even put, Christmas trees and 2 big trestle tables, and bought so much food and bought gifts and stuff like that. And it was huge. I spent hundreds of dollars, and it's just for everyone to come up one day and, say thank you to everyone for being part of my life. And then also too, one of the girls was turning 30. So I had a big 30th birthday party at my house where I invited, everyone in the workplace, and that cost me hundreds of dollars as well. Just, things like that. And I kind of realized that it didn't matter how much I was spending on people and doing things for people. it didn't make a difference anyway. So I ended up losing my best friend of like 7 years because of that as well. She was always at my house and I was always taking her out and buying things for her. And as soon as I stopped all that, it stopped. Our friendship stopped. So it wasn't really a friendship. It was just me buying her basically. So yeah, so I've come to realize like how you get true friends and how you can't buy people with gifts and that sort of thing. So that's been my experience with people pleasing.
Yeah, I can actually relate a lot to this as well. And being someone whose love language is gift giving, I find it really challenging to kind of navigate that because, like, as you're mentioning, like generally, like for me, like throughout the year, I usually like see things like, oh, so and so would like this or that, and I'll save it for like a birthday or Christmas or something like that. And I remember early on, I think I hadn't quite graduated high school yet, and I was really close to this gal. And for all intents and purposes, she felt like a best friend to me. And I had given her a lot of gifts. And one day, just all of a sudden, without explanation, and to this day, I don't know why this friendship ended, but she just basically stopped talking to me. And I was just, again, like I was a teenager. I looking back, I felt like this was kind of childish, but I wanted everything back that I had given her because I had just felt so crushed and so broken. I just didn't understand, like, just everything was great until just one day. She just basically ghosted me. And for me, I feel like my way of showing like love and my care for other people is through gift giving, and in a way we're maybe buying those friendships as you're saying. And so I feel like it can be tough to kind of like navigate, like as someone who I love to give gifts to show that I care about you or that I love you or X, Y, and Z, but also it sounds like there are a lot of people who might take advantage of that, and that's something that we might want to be careful about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thinking back about that experience, how did you say, like, kind of navigate the road after like that loss of that friendship, after you felt like you kind of had to buy it? Did you approach things differently, like when you moved on from that?
I did. I just stopped inviting her over and that. But it was hard because I ended up getting her a job at the workplace so she left her job of 20 years to come to this workplace, and then I left my job and then joined her there. So we worked together for 5 years and didn't speak. So we'd say hello and that sort of thing. So it was still continuously seeing her every day. Took a lot for me, but I thought, I'm better than that. So I don't need that in my life. I don't need to buy her friendship. And if that's what it's going to take for her to be my friend, then I don't need that.
Yeah, 100%. And for me, like I try to be cognizant of if I'm giving to someone, it's like from a place like I really want to, and not kind of feeling like, oh, I'm doing this to kind of preserve the relationship. I don't want to fall into that category. And it's funny because I've had experiences where, and it comes back to like, the childhood, the feeling of not feeling good enough. And so I've like thrown parties, mainly for my husband or other people in my family, like bake cakes, like planned out like a party and whatnot. And I think it's important that we do these things, of course, because like we generally want to do it. And I generally love to do it. And sometimes I felt like I was coming back from it like, was that enough? Did I do good enough for this person? And so sometimes I'm trying to like reconcile like these thoughts of inadequacy. And mostly it's me. It's not necessarily like the other person, like it wasn't good enough or anything. It was like my like perception of, oh, did I like go the extra mile, And so I think when it comes to my husband, like kind of talking out with him, like, okay, what does your ideal birthday look like? Do you want a big lavish party, and kind of having that like kind of understanding and kind of reconciling like my thoughts basically. He really did. He had a great time. Like there's no point in me like thinking like, oh, I could have done more or this and that. And I think also being careful about, again, like navigating that territory out of doing it out of obligation, like feeling like this is what I have to do versus like, okay, I really want to do it for this person because I love them rather than like, oh, they're just expecting it. Right. So sometimes that could be challenging for folks as well. And so I think for me, what's really helped is doing things like, for example, like throwing parties, like I really want to do this, or I want to do X, Y, and Z for this person because I really want to, not just because I think it's expected. And so I think it's important to know. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
I kind of feel too like after you do things like that,
yeah,
friends and work colleagues or whatever, not so much family, but I feel like they end up expecting it too.
Yeah.
And then you kind of, you're starting to think, oh, you know, like I've got to keep doing it because they're expecting it. But I feel like that's how I feel with that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I 100% like understand the feeling because like that feels performative. And I'm like, okay, I don't feel like I'm doing this for the right reason. I feel like I'm doing this out of obligation rather than a genuine place of wanting to do it and backing away. I totally understand what you mean because it's like, okay, well, I've been doing this for the last 5 years for this person. And I guess I should continue doing it. Otherwise, they're going to be like, well, what's wrong or whatever. And that can be really hard to really reconcile. And honestly, I've never been great at like confrontation, but it takes a lot of courage to really just like hold your ground. Of course, depending on the reason that you know no longer want to do it. Maybe this person's, they haven't been a good friend to you or they don't treat you right or vice versa. It's not like something that we might want to like kind of keep in mind, especially like as women, like I think really struggle with people pleasing. And I was actually reading how a lot of times like our people pleasing tendencies is to kind of preserve that friendship. Like we're afraid of losing that friendship. And it's something that like we kind of have to like keep in mind. No one wants confrontation, but like if we're really unhappy with something that maybe our friend said, or maybe that they did, or it's becoming a big problem, that if this person is a true friend and really cares about us, then they should be willing to listen to this grievance that we might have or this concern. But it's, of course, it's all about like how we might want to approach that. Of course, there's a way to approach it. I haven't finished the book, but it is a really good book. And for those listening, I'll get the title and put it in the show notes down below. It's really, really helpful. But I want to talk a little bit more about your journey through addiction and recovery. What did the early stages of recognizing addictions look like? And like what made you want to seek help?
I didn't really seek help. I sort of, when I met my husband, I was like, I don't need all this crap anymore. And so I just stopped doing it. And so my addictions were, I was addicted to marijuana and I used to smoke cigarettes. And my husband didn't know I was a smoker until one night after I'd drunk a few drinks, and then he caught me smoking because I thought he was dead. So after that, I just kind of like just thought, oh, what am I doing? And just threw it all in the bin. But I kept a tiny little bit. And then I ended up finding out I was pregnant. And I was like, I don't want any drugs in my house. And I don't want this lifestyle, you know, if I'm going to become a mother. So I just threw it all out, threw it all in the bin. And I've never looked back because becoming a mother to me was it meant a lot more to me than anything in the world. So, and especially through what I'd been through 10 years before. So it was a game changer for me with that. But when I started drugs, it was more of a peer thing for me. It was kind of like, oh, I had to do it to fit in which comes down to that people pleasing again, I suppose, of, I wanted to fit in. So that's kind of where it came from. And then with losing that baby and having a lot of trauma around how it all happened, I just turned to drugs then. So that's when the addiction got bad. So so basically my life really didn't start until I was 25 when I met my husband.
Oh, I love that. I think back to when my mom struggled with addiction pretty earlier on in her life, probably late teens, early 20s. And she said for her, it was not necessarily easy, but she was able to, when she planned to have kids, was able to kind of stop cold turkey. I mean, before and afterwards, my folks and stuff were doing drugs and whatnot. But she was very intentional while I'm pregnant, vice versa. I am not doing this at all. And then later on, probably maybe I want to say 15 years ago, my brother and I, both adults at this point, and she had kind of another groundbreaking moment. And I think it was when my brother or I moved up to be closer with her, because my brother and I mostly lived with our dad for a number of years. And so she's like, yeah, if one of my kids comes and moves up or moves in with me, I'm done with this. And she was. So when my brother and I had moved to be closer, she was done. And she's I think probably been clean for close to 20 years now. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because it is hard. And I don't encounter many people who are able to just stop cold turkey like that. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And I think it's really inspiring for our listeners as well.
Yeah. So my mum had her own addictions as well, which was before I was even born. She loved to party. And so my whole childhood growing up, I used to see her. She was either in the bedroom with her friends trying to hide away to smoke marijuana or, do whatever else she was doing. I think she had a speed addiction and stuff as well. So, so that was kind of I just felt really alone growing up, because mum wasn't interested in me. She was more interested in the drugs and people pleasing with her friends as well. So, if I had an issue or wanted to speak to her, she'd be like, oh no, I'm busy with such and such right now. And growing up my whole life, when I ran away from home at 14, when I'd call her up, she'd be like, oh, I've got such and such over, I can't talk right now. So, the moments when I really needed my mum, she wasn't there for me. But she got really sick, and that was to do with her job and also the amount of partying she used to do. So I spent, and it was actually Christmas Day that she was put into intensive care. And I had to decide what dialysis and everything to put her on, because her whole body just shut down, and it took them 3 goes to bring her back. And so I ended up spending 6 months in hospital with her, trying to help her recover. And I don't know if you've got them over there, but the Take 5 and That's Life magazines.
Yeah.
So I used to get those and sit in the hospital with her and do the questions, ask her the questions just to keep her brain going, even though she wasn't giving me the right answer. It was making her think. And and then she got out. She went into rehab because she was in bed for so long. So she needed a lot of help and support with everything there. And then she came home, and then she was going fine. And then her friends ended up coming back over. And so she went back into the whole smoking, drinking, drugs. And that was just her life. She would get up and she would have a glass of wine, and she would just sit in front of the TV, and her favourite show was Judge Judy. So she would just sit on her couch and watch Judge Judy all day, or whatever TV show she had. She had Foxtel, but just drinking and smoking all day. And then her friends would come over to visit her and they'd join in, and that was her life. So I distanced myself from that, because I didn't want my children being brought up in that. And also too, she wasn't the mother that I could talk to. So there was no real point. when I was in contact with her, she just wanted me to do things for her all the time. So when she passed, it took a lot of healing for me to get over my childhood traumas and not having the mother that was present for me in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned that your mom's favorite show is Judge Judy, because my mom watched that show religiously too. And my grandmother did as well. And so, yeah, a lot of different stories that I would hear from them. My mom initially didn't always watch it, but like my grandmother did, like kind of like religiously. And then like I think at some point like my mom kind of would as well. And I don't know how long, like or when she started watching it, but it's funny, we were just talking about that the other day too. And I think this was during the time my mom was with us now, but during the time when she was with her ex-husband in a relationship, toxic relationship for many, many years. That was one of her daily rituals, is sitting and watching Judge Judy. And her and my grandmother had like very different like lifestyles to an extent, but like for both of them, they would kind of sit during the day, watch Judge Judy, and kind of commiserate together. And I think I experienced something similar as well. I think honestly with both my mom, my dad, and just feeling like they, not that they were like necessarily like too busy, but they emotionally weren't, for a number of years, since they both were addicted at various points of their lives, weren't like emotionally connected to my brother and I. And I think that's something that like we kind of struggled with growing up as well. Like, okay, like what's wrong with us? And even though like now we know like, okay, the issue wasn't with us. As a child, you think that you're doing something wrong. And my husband experienced something similar with his mother as well. And just not receiving like that, especially from a mother. I think, I mean, of course, it's so imperative for fathers to be connected as well. But when having like that disconnect from a mother or mother figure can be like especially difficult for a child, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
And throughout all of this, you have emerged stronger and more healed. What was maybe the most surprising thing that you've learned about yourself through your journey?
I've learned a lot. Yeah, a lot of different healing that was needed and just a lot of different tools that I've learned all kind of come together and make sense. So one thing I learned the other day in my course was about, it's called like a core crud crust model. And so the core is in the middle, and that's like your authentic self. And that's when you're born. And then there's a layer that comes over the core when you are growing up, like through childhood and as you get older. And that's the crud. And that's all a feeling of, your limiting beliefs and your shame and embarrassment and self-doubt and all things that we pick up along life's journey. And then you've got your crust, which is like showing up as you are now. So how you feel because of the masks that you wear. So just being your false self and the roles that we take on and hide our fear and shame and guilt and all those kind of emotions, because we're putting on a mask to try and hide everything else. So it's about trying to get back down to the core of being your authentic self. And that's a really good one. Like, I'm so glad I learned that, because I'll be using that a lot in my coaching and stuff. So yeah, just finding out how we can get back to being your core, your authentic self.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any advice that you might have for any of our listeners who might just be starting their healing journey and maybe they're at a point where they feel like they'll never be good enough?
Yeah, so just start and go along with it, because you'll never think that you're ready or feel that you're ready. But the more you continue to show up, the easier it gets. And it's about reprogramming your brain. So the more you step out of your comfort zone, the more it becomes normal. So yeah, it's just about taking that step and just going with it. and just keep showing up and getting through. And with those emotions, when they come up, just sit in your body and thank your body for showing you those emotions. And it really helps to calm your nervous system as well when you thank your body for showing you all those different emotions. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And I think it could honestly be a struggle to really be present with our emotions. And I honestly think that if we don't take time to process what it is we're feeling or going through, that a lot of times addictions can arise beyond that because we're trying to push them down. We don't want to feel it. It's uncomfortable. And it really is. But I think when we're able to process those feelings and emotions, we'll be better off, less likely to be addicted and have addictive behaviors present themselves. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And I'm really excited for all of our listeners to hear this episode. And this has been such a great, beautiful conversation that I'm excited for everyone to hear. Would you be able to tell us where our listeners can find you, or they can connect with you, maybe learn more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so I've got a website. It is themightymumma.com, mumma being Mumma. I've just started on there, but I've also got Facebook as well. And all my other platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram, I've just started. So I'm trying to navigate that world of new technology. And yeah, you can reach out to me and we can have a chat. My email address is dani@themightymumma.com. So hopefully I'm going to be taking everything global as well and showing up in a lot of places and helping a lot of people. So
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you and having you on here. I really loved our conversation, and I know our listeners are going to love it too. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.